Hello, my beautiful YouTube and internet friends. Welcome to my channel. My name is Ilona. My channel is all about showing you how you can do your art journaling, mixed media and crafting on a low budget. And while playing with my Gelli plate backgrounds, I discovered a fun technique to make my background look like chipped paint. Very industrial. I will tell you more about how I did that later in the video. So I was experimenting with how to build up my layers. I also wanted to use the 3 long leaves that I picked off a tree by our home. You see me reviving some of the paint colors on my glass mat that I'm working on when I do my gelling printing. I love to use a glass mat for Gelli printing because 1, it gives me a really flat surface to work on, and it's easy to spread out my paints with the brayer, and 3, it cleans up very easy as well. I start by putting my leaves on my Gelli plate. I also wanted the skeleton of the leaves transferred to my background. I give the leaves a coat of paint before putting them onto my Gelli plate. That way I hope to get the skeleton look. And in some of my backgrounds they are a bit visible, but not as much as I liked to. So in the end I changed my mind on that part of the creative process. But you will see that later in the video. And then I start adding a mix of my blue and green metallic paint mixed with some titanium white and randomly roll it on my plate. But be careful that your leaves stay on your plate when you roll over them. Mine came off several times until I found that rolling my paint in one direction works the best. The leftover paint I did not clean off because I hoped it will transfer, so it helps to achieve the chipped paint look that I want. For the second layer I add a little more white, and then I'm using a piece of crumpled up paper. So that's a great low budget tip for you. Just use crumpled up paper to lift up the color of your Gelli plate, which makes kind of a crackle effect. And that crackle effect I really need for this technique to work. And I just did several tries to get it right, and it was hard. And I really cannot tell you exactly how I did it. But the layering and which color comes first is really key in this process. And before I take my print, I will take off my leaves off my Gelli plate. I did at least 7 tries before I got this background. I want to do some stamping on there. The stamping I did with a coaster that I bought for €1 because of the hexagon pattern it had on it, and I thought I could use it as a stamping tool. I really want it to be in the background, so I start by stamping it with a really light sage green color, which you can see but probably not on the video. And then I take a shaded lilac distress ink. The thing about distress ink, when you stamp it, it's making these drops, and you can see that when you stamp it on your page. After stamping, I dabbed it off with a rag, so that way the drops were not really visible and I had this really gorgeous faded stamped background look. And I repeated that again with a light gray waterproof ink, which is called watering can. After stamping my hexagon pattern randomly on my background, I wanted to add another color. And I chose the color Shaded Lilac, and I used a sponge. At first I sponged around my corners just to create a border. And when I did that, I noticed in some places the paper picked up the ink much more than in other places. So basically I think where there was little paint from my Gelli plate, those places soaked up the ink really well, while the other places resisted the ink. And when I discovered that, remember I made all these marks in my paint on my Gelli plate with the crumpled up paper? All those marks randomly on my page, also in the middle, took off the paint from my Gelli plate and left a white spot. And on these white spots I added the ink as well, and it soaked up the ink in those places and less in the surrounding areas because there was already some paint there. So that gave this wonderful chipped paint look. I still have some white spots on my page where the paint was lifted off my Gelli plate that I didn't go over with the ink, but having the ink in some places just enhances the chipped paint look much more than when I had the white space there. So it's a really cool technique, and I'm sure it already exists, but I loved my discovery, and it gives such a cool look to my page. After the chipped paint look, I look at my page and I still see it's a bit flat. It needs a little bit more depth, and the way I do that is just by adding some more stamping with my hexagon coaster in a light gray color, and that just lifts up the whole page just a little bit. Not too much because it's still in the background, but it just gives that little extra. To bring out the leaves, I thought I would try to add the skeleton part in with a pencil and also make some shading. And of course I'm using my Stabilo All pencil for that. It reacts with water, so you can do your shading. But when I'm done with that, I don't really like it. So at that point I'm changing my mind about which way to go. So I decide to use the real leaves onto my page. They already have lots of coats of paint on them because I used them to make my Gelli printed backgrounds. But still I go over it with some gesso Gelli printed backgrounds. And dried leaves before I add some ink to it to give it some color. I really wanted to have a muted page, a really soft page. I didn't want too much contrast, so I picked a color that was a little contrasting but also went really well with the color scheme I already had. And I rubbed it really lightly over my leaf, and then with my finger I spread it out, and later I added ink on top of the color that it already had. So I have this muted color and then specks with the darker color just to give it some extra interest. So if you like to see more low budget mixed media and art journaling, subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the bell icon so you know when I upload a new video. And for the last part, I'm adding a darker border all around my page. And then it's time to find myself a quote or a saying. Usually I take a magazine and just flip through it and see if there's anything that catches my attention and fits in with the feeling of the page. And this time I found a quote, or actually a sentence and a word, and I fitted that together. So the sentence that I found was enjoying everyday life, and I also found the word blessings. So I just pieced them together to get enjoying everyday life's blessings. Thanks so much for watching. Have a wonderful day and a tutorial video. Bye bye everybody, and have a wonderful and creative day.